Sweetheart, this terminal is for corporate clients only. That can't be you. The words cut through the soft murmur of the Denver International Airport like a sharp blade. Heather Collins, the check-in supervisor in a neatly pressed Navy uniform, looked down her nose at the woman standing before her. Her smile was tight, her tone clipped, her hand resting casually on the counter as if guarding something sacred. Serena Blake stood in stark contrast to the surrounding chaos of morning travel. Clad in a pristine white dress that skimmed just below her knees, she carried herself with the calm authority of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, her only accessory a classic silver watch and a slim leather portfolio. No bodyguards, no entourage, just presence. She offered a calm, practiced smile. "Good morning. I'm checking in for Flight 376, Executive Class. The reservation is under Serena Blake." Heather didn't glance at the screen. Instead, she cocked her head, then extended her hand with a smirk. "I'll need to see identification." Serena reached into her handbag and retrieved both her passport and her corporate clearance documents. She placed them neatly on the counter. Heather picked up the passport between two fingers, as if it might stain her manicured nails. She opened it, scanned the first page, then narrowed her eyes. "Serena Blake, huh?" A quiet tension began to settle over the area. A nearby traveler, a middle-aged man in a navy blazer, paused mid-step. A mother adjusting her toddler's jacket stole a glance toward the desk. They didn't know what was happening yet, but they felt it. That shift in energy when something inappropriate is brewing. Heather chuckled under her breath, then flicked the passport off the counter. It spun once in the air, landed flat on the polished tile, and skidded across the floor, stopping inches from Serena's shoes. "Pick it up if it's really yours," Heather said, her voice loud enough to echo slightly against the marble walls. Time stopped. The man in the blazer froze, his eyes flicking from Serena to the ID on the floor. A TSA officer standing a few feet away glanced over but said nothing. A teenage girl nearby lowered her phone mid-scroll, mouth slightly open. Serena didn't flinch. She let the silence stretch, let the discomfort bloom around them. Then with slow, deliberate grace, she bent down. Her fingers curled around the passport and she straightened. Elegant, composed, utterly in control. She met Heather's gaze. "Thank you," Serena said softly, clearly. "Now, may I please proceed with my check-in?" Heather hesitated. The arrogance in her eyes wavered, just for a second. She opened her mouth, perhaps to deflect, perhaps to assert again. But a sound behind Serena cut her off. A child's voice. "Mom, that's her." Serena turned slightly. A young boy, no older than 11, was tugging at his grandmother's sleeve. He was holding a worn paperback titled Eco Heroes, The Future of Clean Energy. On the back was a headshot of Serena Blake, smiling in a wind farm field. "She came to our school once," the boy whispered. "She's the one who builds solar cities." His grandmother, a woman with kind eyes and silver curls, gave Serena a knowing smile. "We know who you are, dear. We're proud of you." Something in Serena's chest loosened. She turned back to Heather. "If we're done here, I believe I have a flight to catch. A rather important one." Heather looked as if she might respond, but a younger employee behind her, a Latina in her 20s with a badge reading Mila, quietly stepped forward. "I'll take care of this, Miss Blake," Mila said, her voice steady, her expression clear. Serena nodded. As she handed her passport to Mila, she noticed Heather retreating into the back office, muttering under her breath. Mila worked efficiently, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Within a minute, Serena was checked in and handed her documents back with both hands. "Your gate is E4, boarding in 40 minutes. I'm sorry for what just happened," Mila added quietly. "Some of us do see it." Serena met her eyes. "Then keep seeing. It matters." She turned, walking toward the security checkpoint, heels clicking softly on marble, posture unshaken. Behind her, murmurs were starting, phones being raised, messages already being typed. A storm was coming, and not the kind forecasted by weather apps. What no one at that terminal knew was this. Serena Blake wasn't just another traveler. She wasn't here on vacation or business as usual. She was en route to a negotiation that would reshape the renewable energy landscape. A $1.6 billion merger was hours from being finalized. And while her opponents thought this small moment of humiliation might throw her off balance, they had no idea that Serena Blake had built an empire out of people underestimating her. The rhythmic hum of the aircraft engines offered Serena Blake a rare moment of stillness. Seated in the private section of Flight 376, she gazed out the oval window as the Rocky Mountains gave way to layers of clouds. But her mind wasn't on the view. It drifted back, far from this altitude, far from today's power games and billion-dollar decisions, to a tiny one-bedroom apartment in the heart of Houston's Fifth Ward. The air had smelled faintly of mothballs and lemon oil, a scent her grandmother insisted meant the house was clean, even if the floor creaked and the wallpaper peeled. Serena had been 11, legs dangling from a kitchen chair too tall for her, listening to her grandmother argue with the power company over a phone bill they couldn't afford. That winter, the heat had cut out twice. But somehow, through it all, Serena never missed a science competition. She remembered sitting at the folding table, poring over an old textbook someone had donated to her school, trying to understand how solar panels converted light into energy. It wasn't the technology that captivated her. It was the idea that something intangible like sunlight could be harnessed, focused, transformed into power. That one principle had shaped everything that followed. At 13, she enrolled in a weekend STEM workshop hosted at the local rec center. That's where she met Mr. Ortiz. He was a former engineer who'd retired early after a spinal injury, but refused to let his mind stagnate. He saw something in Serena. "You ask questions like someone who plans to build answers," he told her one afternoon, handing her a salvaged motherboard. By 16, Serena was building crude windmill models out of PVC pipe and abandoned bicycle gears. By 17, she had won a full scholarship to the University of Texas, majoring in environmental engineering. She didn't just study the grid, she rewrote it. While others focused on utility-scale energy, Serena was drawn to microgrids. Decentralized, self-sustaining energy networks designed for communities that had always been overlooked. Rural towns, indigenous reservations, urban neighborhoods like the one she came from. Her senior thesis was a working prototype for a modular solar battery system. It was rudimentary but scalable. No one at the time had imagined it would become the blueprint for Verdance Systems' first commercial product just 8 years later. The road from prototype to empire wasn't paved with venture capital or media praise. In fact, Serena had faced rejection from 27 funding agencies in her first year alone. Some said her ideas were too radical. Others questioned her leadership readiness. But more often than not, they simply didn't take her seriously. A young black woman in renewable energy, with no political connections, no Silicon Valley backing? She might as well have tried to bottle moonlight. Still, she kept building. Bootstrapped, improvised, scaled small and smart. One school district, then a housing cooperative, then a city block. By year 5, Verdance had implemented over 75 microgrid installations across the U.S., mostly in regions devastated by wildfires or floods. By year 7, they were in government contracts. By year 10, they were in Forbes. Serena didn't chase the spotlight, it chased her. The white dress she wore today had become iconic after a photo of her standing atop a solar-powered rooftop in Louisiana went viral. In it, she wasn't smiling or posing. She was just explaining a capacitor system to a group of children, pointing upward with a grease-stained glove and fire in her eyes. Now, on this flight, with the cabin lights dimmed and the city of Denver left far below, Serena reviewed the final notes for the merger. $1.6 billion. That was the valuation of combining Verdance Systems with Calderon Dynamics, a legacy energy firm with roots in industrial gas pipelines but shifting towards sustainable portfolios. On paper, it was perfect. Her innovation, their infrastructure. But Serena knew better. Deals like this didn't fail because of numbers. They failed because of fear, pride, or backroom games. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Jordan, her executive assistant. Boardroom still locked in. NDA drafts finalized. Strathmore confirmed soft interest. Won't commit unless we maintain majority structure. Serena exhaled. Strathmore Equity was the silent power behind the deal. If they pulled support, Calderon would pounce and try to restructure the merger to favor their leadership. She reached for her tablet, pulling up the media report that had just surfaced minutes before takeoff. The headline wasn't surprising. Controversy at Denver Airport. Tech CEO demands special treatment. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Her face, the white dress, and a caption that said far more than it should have. A lesson in entitlement? Serena stared at the image without blinking. She knew how this game worked. The narrative was shifting, and fast. Someone wanted her boxed in before she ever reached the negotiating table. But what they hadn't calculated was this. Serena Blake had built her entire life from the margins. From overlooked classrooms to underfunded startups, she had learned how to navigate storms while others were still checking weather apps. As the jet banked slightly toward Washington, D.C., she closed the tablet, folded her arms, and leaned back. Let them talk. Let them spin. She had a merger to finish and a war to win. The moment Serena stepped off the plane and into the jet bridge at Reagan National Airport, her posture remained impeccable. Her white dress was still unwrinkled, her expression unreadable. But the sting from the terminal in Denver still lingered in her spine. The flight attendant had offered a tight smile when she boarded, likely having seen the circulating headline already. Serena had simply nodded in return and moved on. Public perception was a shifting tide. Today's icon could become tomorrow's controversy in minutes, especially when race, wealth, and power intersected. And Serena Blake was standing at the very center of that crossfire. As she walked through the terminal, a few travelers stole glances, some curious, others hesitant, as if unsure whether to offer support or distance. She knew that look. She had seen it during college when news broke that her roommate had accused her of cheating. False, of course. But before the investigation even began, professors had started addressing only her white lab partner in group projects. Perception had always arrived before truth. At the baggage claim, her phone vibrated again. Jordan. "You're not going to like this," he said immediately. "Our legal team just got an inquiry from the press. Someone's leaked internal Verdance documents, travel reimbursements, hotel logs, even your security clearance forms." Serena narrowed her eyes. "That's restricted access. Who touched the legal server in the last 48 hours? "I'm already checking," Jordan replied. "But I think it ties back to someone in finance. A junior analyst logged in using elevated permissions. And here's the kicker. Those permissions were coded under Graham Nichols' profile." Serena's jaw tightened. Graham Nichols, her CFO, trusted for 5 years, steady, predictable, unremarkable, until now. As she collected her bag and stepped into the private car waiting curbside, her mind whirred through layers of damage control. The leak wasn't random. It was meant to discredit her, not just as a leader, but as someone allegedly careless with resources, entitled extravagant. She glanced at the driver's ID displayed on the dash. Kevin Dorsey, early 40s, neatly dressed. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror and said nothing, but his eyes held recognition. After a few silent blocks, he spoke. "Excuse me, Ms. Blake. I normally don't say anything, but I saw the clip from the airport." Serena turned slightly surprised. "You kept your head. That woman tried to break you in front of everyone, but you didn't let her." Serena nodded once quietly. "Thank you." Kevin smiled faintly. "Some of us notice, just so you know." The car turned onto Pennsylvania Avenue, and her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. The text read, "They planned it. Don't go to the boardroom tomorrow." Serena stared at the message, her pulse quickening. No sender name, no follow-up, just that one line. The timing was too precise. She copied the message and forwarded it to Jordan. Then she replied to the unknown sender with a single word. "Who?" No response. That night in her hotel suite, she reviewed the merger binder again. Section 5.3, Transition Planning. Section 6.1, Leadership Continuity Clause. The Calderon side had inserted subtle phrases that, under vague circumstances, such as reputational harm, could allow them to temporarily assume interim control of joint assets. It was buried deep, but it was there. Her eyes scanned faster now, adrenaline sharpening her focus. This wasn't just about embarrassment. It was about leverage. If they could undermine her public image enough to claim instability, they could trigger a clause that gave them operational control during the merger transition. Serena set the binder aside. Her phone rang again. This time it was a voice she hadn't heard in over a year. Elena Rojas, the caller ID read, a former executive at Calderon Dynamics who had abruptly resigned after a shareholder dispute. Serena answered. Elena. Serena. Sorry to call so late, but I saw the footage and the headlines. You were never the sentimental type, Serena replied dryly. So why the call? Because I know Calderon's playbook, Elena said flatly. And this smells exactly like what they tried on me. Leaked stories, internal votes, undermining leadership just before key signatures. I had to leave before they buried me. Serena leaned forward, her voice low. You think this is coordinated? I don't think. I know. There's one person you need to watch. Reed Carver. He's not Calderon's employee, but he's your board member, isn't he? Serena froze. He helped secure early funding for Verdance. Exactly, and Calderon's CEO, Walter, is his golf buddy. Trust me, Serena, this isn't about your ID or that smug woman at the counter. This is about control. If they succeed in damaging your credibility, they'll push you out before the merger's finalized. After the call, Serena stood in front of the tall window of her suite, the Capitol dome glowing in the distance. She had fought too hard to build Verdance Systems into a force for change, for communities forgotten by fossil fuel politics. She wasn't going to hand it over to boardroom sharks disguised as collaborators. They had turned a moment of humiliation into a weapon. But what they hadn't counted on was that Serena Blake didn't crumble. She calculated. And tomorrow she would start making her own moves. The conference room was too cold, too bright, and far too quiet. Serena Blake sat at the far end of the long walnut table, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of a closed binder, her white dress once again immaculate. On the wall behind her, the Verdance Systems logo gleamed in soft metallic hues, sleek, modern, and entirely hers. The room was full, yet the tension made it feel hollow. Board members sat scattered along the sides, flipping through documents they had likely already read 3 times. Eyes avoided hers. Phones buzzed silently. The last empty seat directly across from Serena belonged to Reed Carver. Nia James, Serena's chief of staff and longtime ally, stood near the door. She wasn't a board member, but she was Serena's eyes and ears. When Serena nodded slightly, Nia stepped outside. It wasn't a dismissal, it was strategy. Nia had her own task now, confirming who accessed the internal documents that morning and which board member had instructed PR to remain neutral until narrative clarity emerged. Narrative clarity, as if truth were just a matter of timing. Reed entered precisely 2 minutes late, as expected. His tailored navy suit, the slight tan from a recent golf retreat, the easy smile, he looked every bit the polished statesman he pretended to be. Apologies, he said, setting his phone on the table and settling in. Traffic. Serena didn't blink. Then let's not waste any more time. She opened the binder slowly. The agenda today is supposed to be a review of Phase 3 milestones, but I believe some of you would prefer to discuss my leadership instead. Silence. Then a voice from mid-table. Helen Brooks, board member since Verdance's Series B funding. Serena, with everything in the news, and now the document leaks, there are concerns about the optics. Optics? Serena repeated. You mean the fact that I exist in a world that wasn't built for people like me, and occasionally that makes others uncomfortable? Helen shifted in her chair. You know that's not what I meant. But it is, Serena said, her tone even. Because if I were a white male CEO in a blue suit who lost his temper at an airport, you'd call it passion. If I stood up for myself, you'd call it leadership. Instead, the narrative is being weaponized, and you're all letting it. Reed cleared his throat. Serena, no one is trying to diminish what you built, but this merger is delicate. If Calderon senses instability, they may walk. Let them, Serena replied, eyes fixed on him. I don't fear walking away from a deal that only values Verdance when I'm silent. That landed like a stone on glass. The air fractured with tension. No one spoke. Then a soft knock. Nia stepped back into the room, handed Serena a folded note, and whispered something quickly. Serena scanned it. Then she set the note down and looked at the board. "Reed," she said calmly, "when were you planning to tell me that you spoke with Walter from Calderon 2 days ago?" Reed's smile froze. "Excuse me?" "We pulled logs from your company phone," Serena said. "There's a 26-minute call logged with Walter Calderon's private line. That's not speculation. That's data." Reed sat back. "I was exploring contingencies in case the media situation escalated." "You mean, in case I became inconvenient?" Before Reed could respond, Serena opened her tablet and projected a slide onto the large screen behind her. It displayed the specific clause from the merger contract that had been flagged the night before. Section 6.1, Leadership Realignment Protocol. "This clause was inserted without my consent," she said, "and it mirrors tactics Calderon has used before to force founders out just before acquisition closes. I won't allow that to happen." The murmurs began. 2 board members exchanged glances. Another leaned forward. Reed's confident mask began to falter. "This sounds like paranoia," he said. "You're turning a procedural clause into a conspiracy." "I'm turning light into energy," Serena said. "That's what I do. And when someone throws shade, I build solar panels." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Then Helen Brooks, the same woman who had raised concerns, spoke again, this time with a steadier voice. "She's right," Helen said. "The clause should never have been buried. We owe it to our company to revisit the terms." Serena nodded once. "We'll be restructuring the final language before signatures. And until then, I expect full transparency from every member of this board." Reed looked around the table. The quiet rebellion had begun, and it wasn't in his favor. Hours after the board meeting, Serena stood in the glass atrium of the Verdance Systems headquarters, watching as rain streaked down the curved panels overhead. The air inside the building was clean, cool, filled with the hum of recycled energy flowing from the microgrid they had installed last year. Her company was running on systems she had designed, systems that had survived hurricanes, heat waves, and grid failures across the country. What she could not yet engineer, however, was trust, not when whispers traveled faster than truth. Her phone buzzed again. "Jordan." "We've confirmed it," he said without pleasantries. The leak to the media came from inside. Jessica Palmer in finance forwarded the travel documents to a private email address tied to a PR consultant in New York. That consultant worked with Calderon during the Copper Valley takeover 3 years ago. Serena exhaled slowly. "And Reed?" "No digital trace yet," Jordan admitted, "but the consultant's firm is registered to a holding company partially owned by Carver Equity Group. That's Reed's side venture." Serena's silence spoke louder than any curse. She moved away from the window and stepped into the small internal operations room, a quieter, soundproof space where her leadership team often reviewed technical launches. On the wall was a display of the company's solar coverage across low-income districts, color-coded by uptime stability. She stared at it not as a CEO, but as a girl who once had to boil water on a hot plate during a blackout. "They're not just trying to remove me," she muttered. "They're trying to shift the entire mission of the company." If Calderon took control, Verdance would become a compliance brand, used for ESG headlines while gutting the soul out of everything she'd built. Her thoughts were interrupted when Nia stepped in, her brow furrowed. "I spoke with Blake Morris." Serena raised an eyebrow. "The Blake Morris?" Nia nodded. "Yes. He said he saw what's happening and wants to talk. Apparently, he's been monitoring Calderon's moves for months. They tried to absorb one of his logistics partners using the exact same reputational tactics." Serena tilted her head. "And what does he want in return?" "Nothing yet," Nia said cautiously. "But he did mention one name, Senator Talia West. Apparently, she's seen Calderon's internal memos about targeting minority-led firms during high-profile transitions." That gave Serena pause. "Send me everything we have on West's public voting record. If she's clean, we can work with her. But no contact until I say so." Later that evening, alone in her office, Serena opened a secure file on her personal drive, one labeled quietly, simply, Legacy Restricted. Inside were outlines for contingency restructuring, not just for the merger, but for Verdance itself. It included alternate board structures, a break clause that would allow her to spin off the community grid projects into a new nonprofit if the company's mission was ever compromised. She hadn't built Verdance to be swallowed. If they pushed her out, she would fracture the system, take the beating heart, and let the shell rot. As she reviewed the file, her laptop pinged with a new message. The sender was encrypted, but the contents were clear. A video. She pressed play. It was footage from a phone, shaky but focused, recorded in the Denver airport a full hour before her arrival. In it, Marissa, the gate agent who later tossed Serena's ID, was seen speaking with a man in a black suit. He handed her a folder. She nodded. Then he walked away, toward a restricted employee entrance. The timestamp was indisputable. This wasn't spontaneous disrespect. It was scripted, directed. Serena stared at the screen. The man's back was to the camera, but she recognized his gait. Calculated, too familiar. She rewound the video twice before she whispered the name aloud. Graham Nichols, her CFO, her silent betrayer. Moments later, Jordan messaged again. Another journalist just called. They say a source claims you lashed out at airport staff and threatened federal retaliation. Serena didn't flinch. Let them run it. Are you sure? Yes, because in 12 hours, we're going to show them what real retaliation looks like, backed by footage, affidavits, and lawsuits they never saw coming. She walked to the large touch-screen display behind her desk and pulled up the merger timeline. There were just 5 days left until final signatures. 5 days to expose the betrayal, redirect the narrative, and reassert control. She tapped the screen once, zooming in on the Calderon asset map. You chose the wrong storm, she whispered. I am the grid. The next morning began not with coffee or news, but with subpoenas. At exactly 7:35 in the morning, a uniformed federal clerk delivered 2 large envelopes to Verdance Systems headquarters, one addressed to Serena Blake, the other to the company's legal department. The contents were as Serena had predicted. Marissa Thompson, the former gate agent, had filed a formal civil suit not only for defamation, but also for loss of livelihood due to corporate intimidation. It was a move designed to create headlines and hesitation. But what her opponents didn't understand was that Serena had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Within the hour, Serena's attorney, Nadia Chen, joined her in the corner conference room overlooking the Denver skyline. The walls were glass, the view clear, but the strategy, razor sharp. They've overplayed their hand, Nadia said, flipping through the paperwork. The language is vague, no direct evidence, only character implications. But the moment they made this public, we got the green light. Serena nodded. Discovery. Exactly. We can now subpoena airport records, Marissa's communications, the gate logs, surveillance footage, even call witnesses under oath. Serena tapped her fingers against the table. And the footage we received last night, the one showing Graham with Marissa? Admissible, but we'll need to authenticate it through a neutral third party. Do it, Serena said, quietly, and freeze all of Graham's access immediately. If he's feeding Calderon intel, I want him isolated before lunch. Nadia raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to move that fast? I'm not just moving, Serena said. I'm cutting power to the source. By 10 o'clock, internal systems at Verdance registered a forced logout for Graham Nichols' corporate accounts. His assistant arrived moments later to find his access badge invalid. By 10:15, Serena issued a company-wide statement. Effective immediately, Chief Financial Officer Graham Nichols is placed on indefinite administrative leave, pending internal review. The message was short, clear, and most importantly, intentional. Within minutes, the press picked it up. Serena didn't stop there. She scheduled a staff town hall for noon. No live streams, no external media, just the people who had built Verdance by her side. As she stood at the front of the auditorium, facing hundreds of employees, she took a breath. I know many of you have questions, she began, and you deserve answers. The truth is, we're facing pressure, not just from outside, but from within. That pressure is designed to shake our foundation. But let me remind you, this company wasn't born in comfort. We built it from blackout zones and flood recovery trailers. If you came here to play it safe, you came to the wrong place. A silence settled in, not of fear, but of focus. Serena continued, Yes, there's an investigation underway. Yes, we're being sued, but we're also fighting back with law, with facts, with integrity. We are not victims. We are builders. And I promise you, anyone working to undermine what we've built will be exposed. That afternoon, Serena met privately with Blake Morris at a quiet restaurant in the D.C. Wharf District. The tone was different now, less speculative, more strategic. Blake leaned in. You were right to isolate Graham. My own team confirms he met with Calderon's general counsel last week. Serena sipped her tea slowly. Then it's not sabotage. It's conspiracy. Blake nodded. I've already pulled our capital support until Calderon cooperates with an independent review. That won't stop them, Serena said, but it will slow them. Long enough for us to flip the narrative. As they prepared to leave, Blake paused. Serena, if this all goes sideways, if Calderon tanks the merger, what's your next move? Serena didn't hesitate. I create something they can't copy. I walk away with the community division and build Verdance into a public benefit powerhouse. They can take the shell, I'll take the soul. That evening, back at headquarters, Serena received a call from someone unexpected. Senator Talia West. Her voice was calm, professional. Ms. Blake, I reviewed the documents your team sent over, and I have to say, if even half of this is proven, it's not just corporate misconduct. It's systemic exclusion. Serena leaned forward in her chair. Then let's prove it, publicly. You've been trying to hold hearings on equity and infrastructure. Use this. Use me. A pause, then West replied, Be ready. We'll be calling you to testify within the week. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the city lights came alive, Serena stood alone in her office, watching the glow reflect against the glass. The system had tried to quiet her, to break her circuit. But what they didn't know was this. Serena Blake had never needed permission to light the grid. The press firestorm didn't begin. It exploded. Within 24 hours of Graham Nichols's suspension and Marissa's lawsuit, 3 major media outlets published conflicting stories about the merger. One painted Serena Blake as a disruptive force in a fragile negotiation. Another painted her as a brave woman of color, standing against a calculated smear campaign. The third, most troubling of all, speculated that Verdance Systems was on the brink of collapse. It quoted an unnamed source from Calderon Dynamics, who referred to Serena as emotionally compromised and publicly unstable. It was classic deflection, turn the accused into the aggressor, cast doubt before facts can catch up. But facts had already started catching up. Serena's legal team filed a motion compelling airport authorities to release full surveillance footage from the terminal in Denver, and with it came several bombshells. One showed Marissa Thompson reviewing her phone and receiving a notification just minutes before Serena arrived. Time-stamped, geotagged, and verified. Another angle revealed a second man standing at the edge of the counter area, partially hidden behind a pylon, nodding toward Marissa seconds before she tossed the ID. That man, when run through facial recognition, was identified as a contractor hired 3 weeks earlier by Calderon's logistics division under a consultant title. Meanwhile, whistleblowers began to surface. At first, it was one anonymous former airport employee, then 2. By the end of the 3rd day, 6 individuals had submitted signed affidavits through Serena's legal portal, detailing instances where they were instructed to apply additional verification to passengers who appeared unfamiliar with premium protocols. The language was vague. The intent was not. One particularly brave woman, a Latina gate agent named Rosa, sent a video testimonial. In it, she said, "They told us not to over-accommodate passengers who didn't look like they belonged in first class, but they never defined what belonged meant. We all knew." That same night, Serena sat across from Maxwell Reynolds in his private media war room, a glass-walled studio perched atop one of Denver's tallest buildings. Maxwell, the media titan who once fought her, now stared at the screens flickering with raw footage, social feeds, and live sentiment tracking. "You're shifting the tide," he said, swirling ice in a crystal tumbler. "The narrative's evolving in real time." "It's not the narrative I'm after," Serena replied. "It's the architecture behind it." "Meaning?" Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "I don't want to win the story," she said. I want to expose the machine that built it. Just before midnight, Nia burst into the suite holding her phone. We got it, she said breathlessly. Jessica Palmer's full communications archive. From where? Serena asked. Internal forensics, Nia said. We tracked a misrouted backup. She was careless. And it includes emails between her and Reed Carver. Anything conclusive? Oh, more than that, Nia replied, scrolling to a specific screenshot. He instructed her to flag any expense reports involving airport upgrades, and there's a forwarded email titled, Plan C if she doesn't fold. It outlines timing, press cycles, and even a legal contingency memo, dated 2 days before the airport incident. The room went silent. Reynolds stood slowly. You've got your silver bullet. Serena didn't smile. She didn't relax. Not yet, she said. We release it once the board sees it. I want them to realize they were pawns in a rigged game. The next morning, Serena walked into the boardroom once again. Same white dress, same calm expression. But this time, she wasn't alone in her fight. Helen Brooks, flanked by 2 independent directors, had prepared a resolution calling for an emergency ethics review of Reed Carver's conduct. Reed wasn't present. His assistant had sent a vague note about urgent family matters. But everyone in the room knew why that chair was empty. Serena began her presentation with no preamble. She displayed the email archive. She played the surveillance footage. She read excerpts from the whistleblower affidavits. And then quietly she said, You were manipulated, but I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to fix what should never have been allowed to break. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to suspend Reed Carver indefinitely and launched a third-party investigation into the attempted disruption of the merger. One member wept quietly. Another offered Serena a hand, saying, We should have seen it sooner. But Serena didn't need their regret. She needed only one thing, momentum. And now, at last, she had it. The momentum Serena had fought so hard to create began to ripple outward, first through the walls of Verdance Systems, then across Denver's business community, and finally through the national press. In just 48 hours, 5 prominent publications retracted earlier headlines that had painted Serena as unstable. Instead, their revised coverage focused on one thing, retaliation. Not from Serena, but against her. The narrative was shifting, and with each shift came another fracture in the polished mask that Calderon Dynamics had spent years perfecting. At Verdance headquarters, employees began openly rallying behind their CEO. Department leads released internal statements affirming their support. One even reposted the town hall video to the company intranet with the caption, We don't follow trends, we follow power, and she is power. In the break rooms and Slack channels, her name became a shorthand for resilience. Serena didn't bask in it. She weaponized it. Nia entered her office late that evening, holding a printout of an internal memo leaked from Calderon's legal team. They're panicking, she said. This memo shows they were drafting alternate acquisition terms, assuming you'd resign. Serena skimmed the document. Let's give them a surprise they didn't draft for. She pulled up the revised merger plan on her screen, the version that would reposition Verdance not as the acquired, but as the acquirer. The terms were aggressive, unapologetic, and entirely hers. Send it to Blake Morris, Serena instructed. Tell him it's now or never. Either Calderon accepts Verdance as the lead entity in this deal, or we walk. Nia hesitated. And if Blake balks, Serena didn't blink. Then he was never the ally we thought he was. Across town, a phone vibrated atop a sleek marble desk. Blake Morris stared at the incoming message. His wife glanced up from across the room. Is that her? Yes, he said, reading the attached document. And she's not backing down. Then neither should you, his wife replied. You said you admired her. Prove it. At 7:45 the next morning, Blake called Serena directly. You've got guts, he said. You've got timing, she replied. Are we aligned or not? Blake paused. Calderon will scream. They'll threaten lawsuits. They'll pull board strings. Let them, Serena said. I'm not afraid of screams. I'm afraid of silence. We don't go quiet anymore. By noon, Serena stood in the very same airport terminal where the public humiliation had first taken place. But this time, the cameras were there by invitation. She walked toward the exact counter where Marissa had tossed her ID, this time surrounded by employees from Verdance's outreach division. Black, brown, Asian, indigenous, white, all wearing matching shirts that read, "Access is a right, not a look." At the podium, Serena's voice rang clear. "I was told I didn't belong here, not because of my credentials, but because someone looked at me and saw less. Today, I'm here to say I'm not just returning, I'm rebuilding. And no one will define who belongs in these spaces but the people who built them." Behind her, the crowd erupted in applause. That same afternoon, Senator Talia West held a joint press briefing with Serena to announce a new Senate hearing on discriminatory infrastructure practices, focused not only on airports, but on the corporations that influence them. Serena had been invited to testify under oath, but this time, she wouldn't be testifying as a victim. She would be testifying as a witness to a system and a breaker of it. Back in her office, Serena received one final message that cemented what she had long suspected. It was an email sent anonymously, containing a copy of a deleted internal Calderon presentation. The subject line read, "Strategic Obstruction Initiative, Minority-Led Competitor Risk." Inside were slides detailing how to create instability through perception, especially during key transitional events like mergers or IPOs. One bullet point was highlighted: exploit emotion, discredit optics, delay leadership. Serena read it once, then twice. Then she forwarded it to Nadia and whispered, "And now we have motive." That night, while the city buzzed with headlines and hashtags, Serena stood on the roof of Verdance Systems. She stared out at the city lights flickering below, a mirror of the power she had refused to surrender. For years, she had focused on building systems, grids, networks, solutions. But now she understood that the real system, the one beneath all others, was belief. Belief in who gets to lead, belief in who deserves the seat, and belief in who gets to rewrite the terms when the game turns ugly. She picked up her phone and sent one line to Nia. "Prepare the acquisition press kit. We go live at 9 a.m. By 9 o'clock the next morning, the press kit was live. News anchors across financial networks scrambled to keep pace with the unfolding story. The headlines no longer focused on scandal. They focused on audacity. Verdance launches surprise takeover amidst crisis. Blake Morris backs. Blake Calderon's power play fails. Serena Blake restructures the energy merger and the narrative. In under 24 hours, Serena had turned a public attack into a pivot point of strength, not with emotion, not with outrage, but with structure, precision, and proof. The official acquisition document, released through Verdance's secure investor platform, reframed the merger as a full buyout. Serena had insisted on three key changes. Verdance would absorb Calderon's grid technology unit, not the other way around. The new joint entity would bear a new name, Verdance Forward. And lastly, all executive roles would be subject to a new ethics panel during transition. A clause included for one reason: accountability. The markets responded with cautious optimism. Stocks dipped briefly, then rebounded as analysts praised Serena's disciplined aggression. More importantly, retail investors, many of whom followed Serena's rise from the tech world, began buying in again. For the first time in days, Verdance's value surged, still below peak, but rising fast. Serena didn't gloat. She moved. That same afternoon, she held a private Zoom call with more than 40 leaders of Black and Brown-owned startups in energy, logistics, and infrastructure. Many had watched her from afar, unsure whether someone like Serena would remain accessible after power consolidated. But when the camera turned on, she was seated plainly. No backdrop, no filters, just Serena and her voice. "You've seen the storm," she began. "Now let me show you the shelter." For the next hour, she walked them through a new initiative, Power Equity Collective, a fund seeded with $100 million from Verdance's post-merger reallocation pool, designed to support minority-led green infrastructure projects. The mission was clear: build faster, build together, build with proof that the next Serena wouldn't need a scandal to get heard. While Serena built forward, others crumbled backward. Reed Carver was officially removed from Verdance's board that same week. Internal investigations uncovered not only the coordination with Jessica Palmer, but years of backdoor consulting work with Calderon's regional lobbyists. Marissa Thompson's defamation suit collapsed under the weight of authenticated footage, timestamps, and most damning of all, her own deleted post boasting about humbling a billionaire in heels. She withdrew the claim, citing emotional distress, but the damage to her backers was irreversible. Calderon issued a sterile statement about employee misconduct and unapproved outreach, but the industry already knew. They had bet wrong. In Washington, Senator Talia West's committee hearings began. Serena's testimony led national headlines, but she didn't enter the chamber like a warrior. She entered like an architect. Her opening words, "We often think of discrimination as chaos, but in elite industries, it's more often engineering, precision-coded, plausibly deniable, and deeply effective." Her voice did not rise. Her tone did not waver, and yet the room leaned in as if history had entered through the side door. During questioning, one senator asked her bluntly, "Do you believe this incident would have happened if you were not a black woman?" Serena didn't flinch. "No, Senator. I believe it was because I was a black woman who held power they didn't expect me to keep." That night, her inbox flooded with messages from interns, analysts, mid-level execs, all recounting their own moments of being doubted, delayed, or dismissed. But one message stood out. It was from a woman named Elena Ruiz, who had been let go from Calderon 4 years prior after filing a complaint about targeted exclusion in a field project. "I didn't fight back then. I was too scared. Watching you made me wish I had. But more than that, it made me believe I still can." Serena sat quietly for a moment after reading it, then forwarded the message to Nia and typed, "Track her down. We may have a place for her at Verdance." As the week came to a close, Serena found herself back on the rooftop, this time surrounded by a handful of staff members and friends. The city pulsed below. The wind smelled like coming rain. Blake Morris called. "We did it," he said. "No," Serena corrected. "We fixed it. Doing it comes next." A long pause followed. Then Blake asked almost quietly, "Was it worth it?" Serena looked up at the sky. "Ask me again in 20 years, when the next girl walks through an airport, flashes her ID, and no one blinks." The merger was finalized 27 days after Serena Blake stood alone at that check-in counter. But it wasn't just a deal, it was a declaration. Verdance Forward became not merely a new name, but a new model. Energy, infrastructure, and integrity fused into one. Calderon's legacy systems were replaced or rewritten. Every executive had to undergo mandatory bias training and recertification. Every boardroom installed transparency protocols Serena personally designed. It was the kind of reform others wrote in white papers. She coded it into the contract. 1 month after the hearings, Senator Talia West introduced the Equal Access Infrastructure Act, built on Serena's testimony and the compiled accounts from whistleblowers, airport staff, and corporate victims. The act proposed legal frameworks for reporting and auditing racialized treatment in transport hubs and corporate gateways. It passed the Senate with unexpected bipartisan support because, as one senator put it, prejudice isn't red or blue. It's silent and it's everywhere. But Serena didn't stop at federal reform. She launched an educational fellowship through Verdance Forward, the Circuit Initiative. Its mission? To train and fund the next generation of system architects. Black, brown, indigenous, first-gen, queer, low-income youth, anyone whose brilliance had been buried under bias. She placed the first hub in South Denver, the second in the neighborhood she grew up in, the third in a reservation school in New Mexico. The fourth, she said, would be decided by vote. "Communities know where the light needs to go," she explained. James Monroe, her longtime CTO and friend, quietly stepped back from daily operations that fall. When asked why, he simply said, "Serena doesn't need a protector. She needs a clear runway." At the company holiday gathering, he gave her a single object, an old motherboard encased in clear resin. "This was from your first server," he said. "You made it run on 20 volts and stubbornness. It's still the most beautiful thing I've ever debugged." Not everyone stayed. Some board members left during restructuring. A few investors pulled out early, uncertain about the pace of change. Serena didn't chase them. She sent thank you notes, then replaced them with ones who understood that value isn't built in silence. By the spring, Serena had been featured in every major publication, from Forbes to National Geographic, which profiled her environmental designs in rural energy resilience. She never gave them the sound bites they wanted. When asked about the airport, she always said, "That was just a mirror. What matters is what we choose to build once we see ourselves in it." Key. The girl from the airport, Jasmine, sent a letter to Verdance that year. It came written in blue ink, messy block letters, addressed simply to Ms. Serena. It read, "My teacher said your story is in our curriculum now. I got an A. When I grow up, I want to build stuff too. I drew something. It's a charging station that makes music while it powers your phone." Inside the envelope was a crayon drawing of a glowing station with dancing people around it. Serena framed it. Years later, long after headlines faded, long after quarterly earnings normalized and tech blogs moved on to the next disruptor, Serena received a message from a college freshman. Her name was Amira. Her email said, "I was 13 when you stood up. Now I'm in electrical engineering. They still don't always listen. But I remember you said, 'Power doesn't ask to be invited. It flows where we direct it.' I wrote that on the inside of my notebook. Thank you." That night, Serena sat at her desk in the penthouse office of Verdance Forward. The city pulsed below, circuits lit with life. In her hand was that first motherboard, still encased, still imperfect. She thought of the code she'd written in her foster home bedroom, the librarian who handed her the first Python book, the white suit, the silence that fell when her ID hit the floor, and how from that silence, she'd built something louder than outrage. She'd built a signal. Outside her window, a row of solar panels reflected the light of the moon, and somewhere far below, a girl who looked like her walked into an airport. Head high, laptop bag slung across her chest, code on her mind, and no one daring to doubt where she belonged. Serena smiled. The circuit wasn't broken. It had just been rerouted.